Hey everybody, it's Leo, your host of the Building Bellingham Podcast, and today we are here at Doc Swinson's in Ferndale, Washington, a hyper-local brand, and we're doing something that I like to do, and that's drink whiskey. And if you're listening to this video or watching this, the episode has already dropped, and we're excited to share what we did in preparation for this episode. So there's a little time travel going on here, but thank you so much for listening, and we're going to take this thing to the moon. We're excited to share Jesse and his business partner's story on how Doc Swinson was created with passion, creativity, and a lot of fun. Cheers.
I'm Jesse Parker, the Master Blender here at Doc Swinson Whiskey. I'm also one of the founders and creator of the brand here in Bellingham. And we're in our warehouse, our barrel warehouse, where we maintain about 600 to 1,000 bourbon and rye barrels at any given time, where we do all the magic and the bottling for a really awesome local whiskey. We're going to taste a lot of great whiskeys for Building Bellingham.
And do you have a favorite out of everything that you created here? I know it's a loaded question.
You can't pick your baby. No, I don't have a favorite, but I have ones that I absolutely adore right now, which are some of the ones I actually picked for us to taste today. A lot of those are actually finished in specialty casks from Europe, like Pinot de Charente or Muscatel casks, stuff that most Americans have arguably never even heard of here. So I thought those would be kind of fun. So what you do is you're supposed to roll it. And it's not a pretentious thing, it's because when you do this, you're volatile. So wine is a low alcohol percentage, right? In comparison to whiskey, right? Or any spirit. Well, why do you do it to wine? Is because you're trying to introduce oxygen. So what you're trying to do is get more oxygen in contact with the molecules to allow them to volatilize, so turn into vapor. Well, the problem with spirits it already does that on its own by just being open to atmospheric pressure. So it's already, literally, if you had some way of seeing it, you would just see this is evaporating at a high rate. Yeah, so when you do this, you're aggravating it to a point where you're getting too much oxygen, and it's more likely to give you the off profiles. Yeah, so it's more volatile. So what you want to do, if you want to roll your glass, you just roll your glass, and then you smell. And then what you want to do is when you smell, you actually open your mouth. You primarily breathe through your mouth, not your nose, but you end up getting the aromatics into your entire olfactory system, because you have olfactory here, then you have olfactory here. And that's the reason why if you ever do like tastings, you have to drink a little bit. Even wine people know this. Like, you don't just spit all of it. You just need a teeny bit in the back of your throat, because that's going to give you a whole different sensation than you get through here. So it's all about smelling it. Don't stick your nose in too far. Take your time. Going back to it, and you'll start picking up on different profiles. And don't ever be afraid. This is kind of silly. Y'all don't seem like this, but some people are really afraid to talk about flavor profiles. Don't worry about it. Seriously, you all have different olfactory systems. We all smell and associate different memories and different scents with what's going on. So you'll never be wrong. But talking about it out loud is a good way to learn about primary characteristics in a product. So for example, for me, I get a lot of dark chocolate out of this particular thing, and orange peel, like the essential oil characteristic. But one of you might be like, oh, this smells like, I don't know, wood varnish for all I know. Hopefully that's not the case, but a lot of these finished casks have residual sugar in them. So the sugar's from the cask itself, from the residual sugars that were left in the wine when it was fortified. So when you make a fortified wine like a sherry or a port, right, what you're doing is you're stopping the fermentation by using typically brandy. So there's some residual sugar from the grape itself left in there, and that gets spilled over into the whiskey because we're aging in those type of casks, which is a great way to have a little extra. Basically gives it body and thickness. Might as well jump into our first bourbon here. This is kind of our introductory bourbon. It's a 90 proof whiskey. It's a blend of 2 different bourbon mash bills, so higher rye content in both of them. And everything we do here is a minimum of 5 years. So there isn't a whiskey under 5 years old here. Most of them average between 6 and 8 years old. And this one was made for the bar industry. That was the whole purpose behind it. In fact, it's a pretty new release for us, and it's called Session Blend. It's kind of a play off of the whole idea of a session beer, because everything else we do is like 100 105 to 110 proof, and that's a little harder to like keep swigging back.
It's got some zing.
It has a little zing. Yeah,
You kicked
exactly.
out of the bar.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right.
That's my cup, okay?
Don't worry, there's plenty of whiskey. No problem.
What's this one?
So, okay, so this is, so the first one we tried, like I said, 90 proof, blended 2 different bourbons. That usually sits on the shelf around here in Washington for like $40. Like you go to Hagen and buy that one for $40. This one is actually our flagship, where we really started when we launched the brand in 2020, this particular brand.
Yeah, I watched a few of those.
And it's actually a similar blend of 2 different bourbon whiskeys, my pleasure, that's been aged in cognac, Oloroso sherry, and Pedro Jimenez sherry casks.
Is this the one that's like 50, 60 at Hagen?
About $65, yeah.
I think that's the one I know.
Yeah.
One of the ones I got.
This is the one that most people are familiar with because it's the first one we actually put out in the market, which is kind of neat. Triple cask, yeah. Yeah, so this is actually the building that we started the whole company in. So this was our office at one time. So when we moved we used to have an office in the Bellwether. We moved into here and we actually needed production space. Yeah, and it's been kind of piecemealed over the years. It's not particularly large of a bottling line, but it's capable of doing, we'll run about, on the high end, 4,800 bottles a day through it, and that could be anywhere from 1.75 liters, so half gallons, all the way down to 50 ml bottles, which isn't a high speed line by any means, but the neat thing is it'll do any kind of shape, any kind of label, any type of cap. So plastic, metal, corks, you name it. So we can do different types of projects on this one. So this is rye whiskey finished in rum casks. Yeah, there's a rum cask finished to it. Yeah, we're huge rum fans here. Actually, like about a quarter of the barrels currently in this building are actually full of rum instead of whiskey. Oh, wow. So I used to do a lot of rum contracts back when we first started the company. So this is a rye whiskey. It's actually 2 different rye whiskeys that have been aged a minimum 7 years, right? Blended together. So one has a high rye mash bill, so 95.5, so 95% rye, 5% barley. And that's what most people put in rye bottles, for the record. So if you've ever had a rye, there's a good chance it was that exact rye. The company MGP that we contract this with, right? They're famous for their rye mash bills. That's what they do. In fact, most of the Kentucky distilleries copied their mash bills over the years because it's what the industry liked. So here's the catch though. The other rye that's blended into this is a low rye mash bill, only 51% rye in the mash bill itself, with the remainder being primarily corn. So this kind of bridges the gap between rye and bourbon. And that's because there's a lot of people out there that really just have a weird opinion on rye, and honestly they should change their opinion, because more often than not we'll taste these with people, and then people always say, oh, I don't like rye, and that's the bottle they end up with, which is hilarious.
And then you finished it with rum?
Yeah, and then we finished this with rum.
No, it's like off
So, and it's rum from Trinidad, Venezuela, Jamaica, and the USVI, aged in several different types of casks. We do all that in-house here. So I'll bring in bulk rum from those distilleries and then age them in, for example, this whole wall back here, that's just rum.
Like you can almost tell, I get like molasses notes off the
Yep.
top. It's interesting.
Yep, that's primarily the Trinidad rum in this case, as well as the Venezuelan rum. All right, this is the Bottle and Bond.
Yeah.
So this is a straight rye,
Thank you.
high rye content. It's a 95.5, so 7-year age statement on it.
I say the part.
This one was really interesting because normally when you produce something like this, you would just grab a bunch of barrels that were produced. Bottle and Bond is really interesting. Bottle and Bond, what makes it really fascinating is it was the first Consumer Protection Act in the United States, ever, for food products. Which is kind of trippy, right?
I know that.
People would add things like arsenic or chewing tobacco to the whiskey to give it flavor profile, give it a little heat. So that's where the Bottle and Bond Act came into play. And so the whole point is this is distilled in one distillery, one distillation season in 1 year, all aged a minimum of 4 years. This is a 7-year product. And the fun thing about doing this is we could have just dumped up 64 barrels and like put it in one of those big vats next door and bottle it all. But once again, one of my favorite challenges is how do I make my whiskeys not taste like where they're from? Not because they're bad. They're all really good whiskeys. We wouldn't source shit whiskeys, right? We source quality whiskeys. But my goal is not to make mine taste like my competitors. And being the fact this is not a blend of multiple mash bills like all these other ones, it was more of a challenge. So I went through all 64 casks, found all their primary characteristics, right? Over the course of about a month, it took me to do it, and blended in different profiles that would invite people that actually were more like bourbon drinkers than rye drinkers. That's why this is really quite smooth, sweet, with just a little bit of spice, right? And a little bit dry on the back end. And the whole purpose of having it a little bit dry on the back end is so you want to drink it again. Yeah. If it's too sweet, you won't pick up that glass as fast. So it's kind of fun. Yeah, so like finding all those different profiles and seeing how they affect people is a big part of the job. Because in the end, we want you to drink this bottle. That's good. It's cool if you want to save them all, it's great, but we'd really rather have you drink them, because in the end, if you don't drink them, we all fail. It's not a good plan. It's not a good business plan. We were just releasing, like I said, about somewhere between 20 and 40 barrels a year from 2017 to 2020 before we really decided to launch this as a brand. And I got a call it was the weirdest thing in the world. I got a call from somebody I met a long time ago and said, "Hey, I've got this 15-year-old bourbon. Are you interested?" It didn't fit the profile of the distillery that produced it, and they weren't going to ever release it anyways. So I gave it a try and I said, hell yeah, this is gonna be great. So we ended up buying a good chunk of it up and bringing it here, doing our blends, putting it on the market. It was a time when, Doc Swinson was definitely not a recognized name. I mean, it's still barely even known, right? But amongst whiskey nerds, they know brands. They know them very quickly. Reddit's an amazing thing. What we did is we ended up launching this product before anybody else got their hands on it into about 22 states for a price point that was just pretty much unbeatable by any of our competitors. Now, granted, that price point was about $150. Today, that would probably be closer to a $400 bottle, just because of the way the market's gone. All of a sudden, all these people are like, who the hell is Doc Swinson? What are they doing? Like, why are they doing this? And all the other people that got the similar barrels from the same producer, we beat them across the board in competitions because of the blend that we ended up doing here. And all of a sudden people started paying attention. So we had to follow it up with something, and that's where the second one you all tried came into play. That was our follow-up, which is a completely different ball game here. But I didn't have any more 15-year bourbon left, So this next one you're all trying is bourbon that's been finished in Pinot de Charente casks. And exactly. So Pinot de Charente is a really rare thing in the United States. If you're French and grew up in France, you probably know what this product is pretty quickly. Pinot de Charente is technically a fortified wine, but unlike sherry or port where it goes through fermentation, most Pinot de Charentes do not undertake fermentation at all. What it is brandy, usually young cognac, that is then added to fresh pressed grapes that would then be normally fermented to be turned into cognac. So they add those two together in a barrel. And in Pinot Blanc, well, this is a Pinot Blanc, there's two. There's Pinot Rouge and Pinot Blanc. It's typically a minimum of 18 months in barrel, but in most cases it's much older. This particular one was about 10 to 12 years old, and then it was dumped. Those barrels came to us and we put bourbon in them.
I really like this one.
This one's solid. This one I believe is 107 proof, cool. So actually these casks right here are cognac casks, and then we have a bunch in the back that are Pinot de Charente casks that we bring directly in from a producer that we've got a good relationship in France, and they're all 23 years and older, which is kind of wild. You start getting a little bit earthier qualities when it starts getting old. It's called rancio. Basically means rancid, more or less. It's a really sought after profile in old cognacs in particular.
If you know,
Yeah, if you know, you know, and you're like, oh,
rancid. And then
Yeah.
It's like, ooh, rancid.
basically it means like earthy and nutty, but yeah, a little mushroomy.
So with like oxidation,
Yeah.
how much does it affect? Because it affects beer a lot within like
course.
weeks, right? Like
Yep.
days. Really.
Yep.
But with whiskey or bourbon or whatever, when you pop the top and you get some oxygen, you close it up.
Yep.
Like how much does it affect?
An extremely slow rate in comparison. It could be years before you really start noticing a profile difference. An old trick to keep, so for example, it does make a difference, right? In general, in the bottle, it's only, once again, maybe a decade or so, you'll start noticing it'll be off-putting. In the barrels, we want oxidation. That's the whole purpose for us. We're very different than wine and beer. We want a head space in there. We want oxygen to be getting in and out of the barrel. You kind of want that in wine and beer too, but you don't want the head space, right? Because then you have bacterial issues. We don't have that problem, so it's not a big of an issue. In the bottle itself though, for example, if you have this bottle and it's got like this much in it, it's not gonna be that big of an issue, even in a decade. But if you've got like this much in it, yeah, you're gonna start noticing a profile change. So drink it. The other thing to do is what's really common for distillers, for example, if they wanna make sure they have a standard, like a benchmark, they actually just put marbles in them. So some people use like inert gases and whatnot, which is really common, but honestly they blow off. So what most distillers will do is they'll just fill it with marbles. It's just glass. You're just displacing the space. Yeah, that's all you're doing.
So you don't have space for the gas.
Exactly.
So then
So then it doesn't exist.
I've never
Yep.
heard that before.
It's a cognac thing.